President Muhammadu Buhari has today signed the finance bill into law, signaling that Nigerians will have to pay more value-added tax from 5% to 7.5% this year. And eminent Nigerians gathered today to discuss the effects of the Nigerian Civil War and what must be done to avoid a repeat of the carnage of the late 1960s. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbalia, Channels Television's global headquarters in Lagos. Let's tell you about one of the stories that have been trending over the weekend. There's been a huge debate. Well, wife of the president, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, has today sparked more criticism about her daughter and the debate after over the use of the presidential jet, after she posted a video of her daughter's trip on board the presidential plane to Bauchi State for what has been described as a purely private trip of Anand Buhari, daughter of the president. Mrs. Buhari tweeted a video of Anand on her daughters, on one of her daughters, waving at the crowd from the presidential jet. Anand's use of one of the aircraft in the presidential fleet to a private ceremony in Bauchi had stirred a controversy, with many accusing her family of abusing power. Human rights lawyer Mr. Femi Falana had said it was illegal for Anand to use the jet on a private trip. But the presidency had defended the first daughter, saying the presidential jet can be used by Buhari's wife and children. Well, let's now check some other stories we are following for you on our political roundup. Well, we'll bring to you some of those stories we're following for you on our political roundup. But let's tell you about what went down today when eminent Nigerians gathered at the Muson Center in Lagos. The memories of the Nigerian Civil War, which ended 50 years ago, still lingers, and some prominent Nigerians have been discussing Nigeria's post-Civil War experience in Lagos 50 years after the historic event. They're reminiscing on the woes of the war, which ended in January 1970, and that was adjudged one of the worst scenarios of civil strife across the world. Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka, Professor Anya Aya, Professor Banji Akintoye, and Professor Patu Tomi among the participants. They gave their thoughts on what Nigeria needs to do now.
As I call on all to forgive and heal. As for him,
Nigerians have to reflect on the road we have passed. For example, the proposition can be made that we went to war because there was a failure of leadership. And in saying that, I will remind us that the three regions were really doing very well. The critical question is, why does Nigeria wobble so badly in spite of experience that should be driving it forward, and what can be done about it? I think we can list reasons to include: one, a mistaken view that Nigeria is about how much you can extract from the national cake. A cake to eat makes poor tomorrow, but producing makes rich always. There is a duty that each and every one of us has. It is the duty to believe that it can be different, and that if we can dream it, we can make it happen. We are already in a crisis. If we, in our sober deference to reality, find that we can no longer hold together as one country, then let us together peacefully find a rational solution. And let us never again plunge into any kind of war among us.
The leadership, on whichever side, is about to repeat, yet again, the ultimate folly of sacrificing 2.5 million lives on the altar of absolutes, any absolute whatsoever. We should borrow that African-American credo, paint them on prayer scrolls, flood the skies in their millions with kites bearing that inscription, and balloons that read very simply, African lives matter.
Stand by for political roundup, everyone.
The scheduled hearing of the governorship appeals for Imo, Bauchi, Sokoto, Kano, Plateau, and Benue states at the Supreme Court will now hold on Tuesday, following the announcement that one of the judges called in sick. The 7-man panel led by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Tanko Mohammed, will decide whether or not Governor Meke Hedio of Imo, Balam Mohammed of Bauchi, Abdullahi Ganduje of Kano, Aminu Tambuwal of Sokoto, Simon Lalong of Plateau, and Samuel Otom of Benue State were duly elected in the 2019 governorship elections. Civil servants in Edo State will have every cause to smile on receiving the alert for January 2020 salaries, which will reflect the new minimum wage of 30,000 naira. The state governor, Mr. Godwin Obaseki, gave the confirmation after signing into law the new minimum wage structure for civil servants after a meeting with organized labor at the government house in Benin City, the Edo State capital. He added that an agreement on the new minimum wage structure was easily reached with a joint negotiating council based on transparency on both sides, with government willing to provide a conducive environment for workers to deliver their best. A coalition of civil rights organizations in Abuja under the aegis of civil rights groups in defense of justice is asking the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) to go beyond the arrest of Senator Shehu Sani in the alleged bribery scandal and investigate the role played by all actors in the matter. The spokesperson of the group, Mr. Dabu Matazu, maintains that both the giver and the taker of the alleged bribe should be investigated. The group is also asking the Chief Justice of the Federation to do more than write a disclaimer, but to also formally put in a complaint to the security agencies asking for the arrest and prosecute all those who want to drag the judiciary to disrepute.
Both the bribe giver and the bribe taker are corrupt and should be punished.
Thank you so much, everyone. So let's begin our conversation tonight. It has to do with you and your pocket. So brace up, because you will have to pay more for specific goods and services that attract value-added tax this year. Yeah, you heard me right. This is because there is a new law now, and today President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the 2019 Finance Bill into law following its passage by the 9th National Assembly. The bill, which was introduced alongside the 2020 budget, aims to reform Nigeria's tax laws to align with global best practices and support micro, small, and medium enterprises in line with the federal government's ease of doing business reforms. It also seeks to incentivize investments in infrastructure and capital markets, as well as raise government revenues. It's the first time since Nigeria's return to democracy 2 decades ago that a federal budget is being accompanied by the passage of a finance bill, especially designed to create an enabling environment for business and investment by the private sector. But the president has clearly stated that how he hopes to secure more revenue for Nigeria and ensure that there is more money to be spent. But the crux of the matter, for whatever you may be thinking in your mind, that what is in it for me as an average Nigerian when I get my salary? What happens to it? What happens? And the truth is that you will have to pay more because VAT has increased from 5% to 7.5. Understand 7.5%. That is the new law. That's the new reality of our time. So let's get some experts to give us a sense of what this means for your pocket, for the food on your table. Don't forget, if you are getting a 30,000 minimum wage, you probably will part with some of that as VAT. Well, the federal government has said a large percentage of that money will go to the state and local government. What does this mean for you? Let's get Mr. Albert Folorunsho, technical consultant, Presidential Tax Formulation Committee. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Also, Mr. Yomi Olugbenro, partner and West African tax lead at Deloitte. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming tonight on the program. Let me get Mr. Olugbenro to get us started before we bring Mr. Folorunsho to explain what is on the mind of government, because this looks like a new reality for Nigerians, waking up to a new year gift of them paying more tax, VAT. So, Mr. Olugbenro, what does this mean for an average Nigerian on the street? Now they're getting half of the first month of the new year, new reality of new VAT regime.
Right. Good evening, Sheun. Well, that's correct. We have the Finance Bill 2019 signed into law today. So what that means effectively is that many of the conversations we had, going into Christmas last year around changes that are happening are effectively having the backing of the law. And one of it, obviously, is the new VAT regime. So VAT, if the version of the bill that the president signs today is exactly what we saw going into Christmas and what we saw being passed by the National Assembly, it means VAT in Nigeria has effectively moved from 5%, to 7.5%. So, which theoretically means that all of the items that are liable to value-added tax, the VAT element have gone up by 50%. But that alone won't tell the full story of what has happened today, because increment in VAT is just one of several changes that are happening to in our tax law. So whereas on one hand there's an increase on the VAT side, there are a number of complementary reliefs and benefits that are also expected to come into force together with this signing of the bill into law. And if we stay even with the VAT alone, one of the measures that the government has taken into account is to make sure that the real vulnerable, those at the lower end of the spectrum, also have some bit of cushioning. And that's why the amendment introduced an extension of food items and the typical consumables that the very low we typically consume. So if you look at it from that perspective, yes, overall there's an increment in VAT, but there's a lot of compensatory relief that are coming together with it. One of which is the expansion in the basic food items, so that what you typically consume is not subject to this hike. The other compensatory relief is that the micro and small businesses are no longer going to be asked to account for VAT on their transactions. That wasn't the case as at the close of business yesterday. So it's a well balanced change, if you ask me.
Oh, we'll go on a break. But when we come back, Mr. Albert Folorunsho, one of those who sat to design what we now see as a new reasoning in our VAT regime will be explaining to us, because some experts will tell us that this will effectively affect the take-home or the monies in the pocket of an average Nigerian. And the fact that inflation is also, what happens to that also with all this VAT? We'll go on a break, but when we come back, more on this, what you need to spend your money on when we come back from this break, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. So we're talking about what the law Nigeria's president, Muhammadu Buhari, signed today and how it will affect you. There is a new VAT regime as we speak. It's a law, and you will be paying 7.5% VAT as against 5.5% that you paid earlier today. But it's now in law, and how will this affect your pocket? My guest tonight, Albert Folorunsho, technical consultant, Presidential Tax Formulation Committee from our Abuja studio. Yomi Olugbenro, partner and West African tax lead at Deloitte. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program tonight. Let me come to you, Mr. Folorunsho. When your team are thinking about this, some analysts are already saying that this will have a large effect on the price of goods and services not included in the VAT exception list, and that this in turn affects Nigeria's inflation. And look, the annual inflation rate in Nigeria rose to 11.85% in November of 2019 from 11.61%. If you look at it from June 2019, it started rising. And if you look at what the decision has been made today, aren't we get into more trouble with this decision?
Thank you very much, Shehu. If you look at the finance bill, which has now been passed to law, that is what Nigerians have been craving for. Our law was not, amended for the last 20 years, and so we must give kudos to the President and the National Assembly that worked in putting this bill that has become law now. So, if you look at the bill, it is not all about VAT, and that is what Yomi alluded to. There are several incentives that have been introduced into the Nigerian tax law. Even if you look at the VAT law itself, if your turnover is not up to 25 million in a year, you are not expected to charge VAT. So you can't, the low-income earners can patronize most of those people that has turnover below 25 million, okay, because you are not expected to charge VAT. Other incentives that have been introduced is the fact that the exemption list have been expanded to include several other basic food items, those who are not really basic, pasta, wheat, flour, all of those have been included in the VAT Act. And if you go through the other provisions in the law, there are more incentives than the 7.5% that VAT has been increased to. Okay, we have companies that have turnover of less than 25 million now are not expected to pay any tax. So provisions have been made for the small and medium scale. If your turnover is between 25 million and 100 million, you pay company income tax rate now at 20% instead of the normal 30%. And of course, several other areas in the law, if you look at the issue of dividend tax, that has been a problem for companies, that has been sorted out now. You can now
Mr.
pay
Folorunsho,
out of your profit.
I understand some of, and it's great that you are explaining to us some of the perspectives or the dynamics of the new regime and the new law. But the concern of some analysts will say there is going to be an effect on in the inflation rate. What do you say to this?
That is what there may be a small impact, but that has been taken care of. If you look at companies that are expected to, increase the cost of their products, some form of benefit, some form of relief have also been introduced, for companies, such that they can benefit. The level of tax that they are exposed to has been reduced. Of course, when you talk about inflation, if you look at other countries around, Nigeria, even in the West African region, the Nigerian tax rate of 5% is about the lowest. Even the 7.5% is still the lowest. And we trade with these other countries. They have also touched the issue of excise duties on imported goods so that the goods that have been produced in Nigeria can be competitive. And that will also reduce, how much will have been charged on those goods, and therefore automatically reducing the VAT impact on the
All right. Mr. Folorunsho, just a moment. Let me quickly get Mr. Olugbenro back. And Mr. Olugbenro, just briefly, give us a sense of what the average Nigerian should be prepared for right now. If you're an average Nigerian, perhaps, who is getting the 30,000 naira minimum wage at the end of the month, what should he or she be prepared for the shock that they might be experiencing in their pockets?
Well, I think it is fair enough to say that with an increase to 7.5% in the VAT, there is a reasonable expectation that the purchasing and different services and product that Nigerians will be consuming, there's a reasonable expectation that prices will have to go up to recognize the increase of VAT rate from 5 to 7.5%. And we must be honest with ourselves. There is no good way to part with money, So everyone feels the pinch whenever you have to pay a little more than what you ordinarily do. But we understand that the economy needs an increase in revenue. So what the government has done is to manage as much as is practicable the impact of the possible, hike in prices of goods. And that's why government has taken care of, the real vulnerable sector by making sure that, items that are not supposed to be liable to VAT, medical services, transaction
All right.
services.
Let's allow Mr. Folorunsho to give us his closing remark. And it's going to be on the fact that in this law, it is said that about 85% or so of this VAT will go into the state and the local government. Am I right? In 30 seconds or less, give us a sense of what these monies will go into and how it will be spent, for infrastructure or for what, in 30 seconds.
Well, the tax revenue, the distribution of VAT collection is 50%, for the state, 15% is for the federal government, and then the balance is for the local government. Okay, so basically it is for the state. And the increase, like we said, everybody will feel the pinch to a large extent. But what government has said is that for us to be able to give you these other incentives that you desire, there's a need for a little increase in VAT.
Okay. Now, it's good that my guest United have given us a sense of what we need to expect with this new law, and I must sincerely thank both of them. Albert Folorunsho, a technical consultant of the Presidential Tax Formulation Committee, and Mr. Yomi Olugbenro, our friend and a partner and West African tax lead at Deloitte. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. Let me get some of your views in a few seconds. Some of the tweets that you sent to us. Sumba Batmos at Planner for All says, to be candid, increase in VAT with 50% is incongruent to the reality of what Mr. President Buhari stands for as pro-poor. Paradoxically, it shows that increase in salary is indirectly proportional to increase in VAT. Electricity attracts VAT. Babashola Adegbuyi at B. Adegbuyi says there is no issue with increment of VAT or generating more revenue, but the issue is the judicious utilization of revenue being generated. What has been happening to the trillions being announced by government agencies, the middle income earners bear brunt more. The last tweet on the program by Cheng Paul at Paul IC says, whether government increases or decreases VAT, it will still trickle down to the common man directly or indirectly because Nigerian government is inconsistent in its policy and has no control over the market. With that view and tweet, we close the show tonight on the program. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Don't forget that our program, News Night, will air tonight at 9 p.m. And watch out for the full interview with the former military president, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, on post-Civil War reconciliation efforts and other burning national issues. It comes up on our current affairs program, Newsnight, at the top of the hour. The program will air on all channels television platforms. So brace up for that, everyone. That's how we leave it tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm sure Kimberly. Enjoy the rest of your evening.